Hey there, we're Cody and Christina and we're building a box truck into the ultimate DIY expedition rig. Last week we started the long process of preparing our floor for staining, wired overhead lights, and installed the majority of our ceiling planks. This week we build our bed platform start to finish and finally stain and polyurethane our floor to its finished state. Enjoy. Finally, we are going to start working on our bed construction. So, good morning Rose, thank you for kicking your ball over here. Yes, I know. Okay, give her. Kick. So we're going to be using this 3/4 inch sheet of Baltic birch plywood. This will go on the front of the box here. And what we need to do is we actually need to trim it. It's 96 inches wide. We have about a 91 inch space, so we need to rip a little bit off the end. And then the sheet is 48 inches tall. We need it to be 40 to 41. This is our beautiful fence. We only have a circular saw, and you do not cut freehand with those because it's never going to be perfect. So we're going to clamp this aluminum angle down, and this will be our guide so we get perfectly straight cuts. Let's do it. Alright, so here we are at the front of the box. This is going to be under the bed. This is the 3/4 inch sheet of Baltic birch plywood, and this is going to also be a bed support for us. So what's going to be happening, we have our steel studs here. First thing we need to do is mark out where the studs are on our sheet of plywood. This way we know where we're doing rib nuts, because we're going to be bolting this to the steel studs so it's super strong. So that's the first thing, mark the studs. The second thing is we need to figure out where our 2x4s are going to be sitting. And they're not going to be sitting flat like this, because this will give you some flex. They're going to be flipped vertically. And then the top of the 2x4 is going to be sitting flush with the top of our bed frame slash piece of Baltic birch plywood. So after we mark all the studs, we're also going to be marking where to notch out a slot for these, because these are just going to slide straight into the plywood and sit in there. We'll probably glue it in, but it's going to be really strong. We just marked out all the studs, so all we did was just press our plywood against the stud lines here, and then we just took our triangle and just drew lines where the studs are. What we're going to do, bring it outside, translate these little marks on the top all the way down the sheets of plywood, and then we'll know our exact area where we need to rib nut. Alright, so this is the top of our sheet of plywood. We need the bottom of our slat, the 2x4, to be at 41 inches so that they could clear our mountain bikes, our dropper posts, without having to lower anything. We're going to be cutting a notch around the 2x4 for them to sit inside of. After tracing out where I wanted all of our 2x4 slats to be, I got to work slowly cutting these spaces out with a jigsaw. I wanted them to be as tight as possible, so I made sure my cuts were as accurate as I could make them. We aren't very concerned about saving weight like we were in the van, considering the truck can carry an additional 9,500 pounds of build weight. The 2x4s were readily available at the local hardware store and inexpensive, which was a huge plus. So we just did our first slot cut for our 2x4s. And it's pretty dialed and tight, I would say. We're going to be gluing these in as well, but that's how our beams are going to sit for our bed. Alright, so Christina's tracing onto the sheet of plywood where our stud locations are. So we're just going to be making those marks all the way down where each stud is. Now that we've notched out all the 2x4 slots, we have our stud line. What we did was we figured out where we wanted our rib nut locations, and then we found the center of each stud, drew a line straight down it, and then wherever our rib nut location met with our center line, we're now drilling the holes out. So we're using 1/4 inch 20 rib nuts, which requires a 3/8 inch drill bit hole. I'm using a smaller bit just to get the hole going. So we got our 1/4 inch 20 bolts, hex head, big old fender washer. This is how it's going to look from inside under the bed. Just like that. That fender washer is going to disperse the load of the bolt really well so the bolt head doesn't dig into the wood. And then this will be going through into the rib nut. Alrighty, so now that we got our plywood back in here, as you guys can see, we have the notches for our 2x4s slotted out. And then we have our holes drilled for where the rib nuts are going. So what we're doing is we're lining the plywood up, checking to make sure it's square with the walls. And then I'm just using the same size drill bit I drilled through the wood with and tapping the studs so that we know where to drill our rib nuts through. So we're just going to do all the holes right now. So it is time to start drilling our holes for the rib nuts, just starting with the smaller bit. The bit size we need is a 3/8 hole for the 1/4 inch rib nuts. And since these studs are hollow behind them, Christina's just going to slide these pieces of wood behind them. so that when I'm drilling through them, just in case it drills through, it's not going to go through the box. Definitely a good call to be putting these behind here, because when that bit's going through the steel studs, it's jumping into the wood. So this probably would go through the box if we did not have this.
I'm Nate Murphy, and I have literally just bought this van to show you how to build a van. We have made a really detailed course which will help you go from this to this. You will learn everything you need. We help you specify your electrical system, and you'll be able to access the community all building their own vans at the same time.
Alrighty guys, so we have our little niece here. What's your name?
Angela?
This is Angela, and she's going to help me install our rib nuts tonight. So we have our rib nut tool, and then we have our 1/4 inch 20 rib nuts with our bolts. So what you guys do is you take your rib nuts, you open up your rib nut tool, and you just thread your rib nut all the way down until it's snug. Let it go. All right, Angela, you ready? Come on over here, and then you're going to help me open it up. Remember? So you hold that side. Okay, does it look good? And then we're going to press it towards me with me. Squeeze it. Press really hard. Good. Now we're going to open it, let it go, and then you hold that for me. And then we just back it out. So we got all 15 rib nuts inserted in. As you can see, there's actually a little bit of runny paint as well. Forgot to mention earlier, but these are steel studs, so we wanted to make sure to paint the insides. And we also vacuumed up any little metal shards we may have, just in case, because we don't want any rusting in here. Now that it's done, all we have to do is bring our sheet on over, our plywood sheet, bolt it in, make sure we're happy with the fit, and then just keep rolling from there. When installing rib nuts, it's always a tricky task making sure everything is properly lined up. Even the pros make mistakes, and you may need to enlarge the holes in your material, in our case the Baltic birch, for the bolt to perfectly line up with the rib nuts. The bed wall super dialed, it's all clear coated up, staying in here permanently now. And what we didn't show is putting in our 2x4s for our horizontal support beams. Yeah, we just used the 2x4, cut it to the length we needed, and then just put some rib nuts in. So we have 4 along this length, which is 60 inches wide. And then what we're going to do now is we got our other full length 2x4, and this is what's going to be the front support. And this guy is just going to screw right into the 2x4s rib nutted to the walls. So we're going to glue them, screw them, and then this thing will be super strong. And then we'll have our full width platform up here. After testing to make sure the width of this front 2x4 was dialed, we got to where gluing up the edges of the 2x4s, making sure the front piece was perfectly leveled, and screwing it in with some long construction screws. We got something in the way now! Cool. This one's going to be right when you peek in. Now that we have our front bed support, which is screwed in to the 2x4s, which are rib nutted to the walls on both sides, we cut our slats up, and now it's just time to make sure they all fit. So we'll be sliding them into the bed support, smacking it in there because it is pretty tight. We'll be gluing them into there since it's so tight, and then we're going to screw in from this side and glue them up. We'll have 6 supports all the way across. Now this was the fun part, measuring to align all of the slats, gluing them in, and firing the massive screws down the slats. It really helps to pre-drill for such a long screw, followed by the power of an impact drill to drive the screw in. And now we have an actual structure in here, which is super freaking exciting. Thankfully, I have plenty of headroom to sit up in because we're going to be doing a lot of work under here. We're going to be doing electrical, we're going to be doing water, the bikes are going to have to fit. So it's cool to finally see it. It's going to be super, super strong because of this front wall that we're going to be working on. We're going to be taking the same principles as a home studded wall. So we're going to be using a 2x2, which is 1.5 inch thick, screwing that and gluing that into our floor. This thing's not going anywhere, so we'll glue it, screw it down. Alrighty, so next step is fitting our platform, which is going to be made out of 1/2 inch Baltic birch plywood. This is exactly how we did it in the van. We never felt like we needed 3/4 inch. We don't notice any flex. And with how solid these vertical 2x4s are, I think it's going to be perfect. We've never had any issues with mold. I know a lot of people prefer the slatted option. And once we have this fitted, we're going to put a bunch of hole saws all over it so that our mattress can breathe, which will be really nice. going to put the two 2x4s in here and the two on the other side. We're not going to be putting the center one in just because we're still going to be moving large things under the bed, but by putting these 4 up, it should be plenty strong. So we're going to just pocket screw these posts in. Bottom one to the 2x2s, tops to the 2x4s. Decided to make this bed build as simple as possible, tweaking some common home construction methods to suit our needs for this bed support wall, making sure everything was square before screwing them in, and applying glue where it was needed. The 2x4s were a pretty tight fit while dry fitting them for alignment, which is a good thing, less chance of having a weak point if they are snug without being fastened to anything. So now that we have 4 of the 5 vertical legs in, we're probably just going to be doing some hand sanding under here, and then we're going to clear coat and just kind of seal up the 2x4s. They'll look a little nicer, a little glossier. And then we're going to work on the sheets for our platform. We're going to need to hole saw them, we're going to need to sand them, and we're going to need to seal them up. Since our plywood is meeting in the center between 2 of the vertical studs, there's a little bit of deflection downward. We're going to add 3 2x4s that are pocket screwed into our studs under here, just so that where the center of each sheet meets, when they meet together, they're not going to be bowing downward. So it's about time to make our floor happen. It's just one of those things that we just need to get done because there's never going to be a good time for it because you want to be building all the cool stuff. But we need to stain the floor. We're going to be using a special walnut, so it's going to be a little bit darker than our cabinets. So we've already sanded everything. We just need to make sure we're happy with how it looks, make sure there's no scuffs, and then get staining. Urethane's instructions clearly stated to apply across the grain and then wipe excess off with the grain. I highly recommend you wear gloves when handling this stuff or expect your hands to turn a few different shades of color. We decided to use a foam brush to apply, but later picked up that hand wiping on with a rag is a far better method. For going across the grain on the entire garage floor, we were not happy with how it came up, so we actually sanded the floor down as much as we could and reapplied the stain with the grain. It yielded a far better result, and that's exactly why we did the garage first. It meant that when we did the main living space floor, we knew exactly how to do it, what to expect, and when it was all said and done, we were extremely pleased with how good the floor came out. Day 2 of the flooring in the truck. This dried overnight, our 1 coat of stain, and we're actually really happy with it. It's light, which we really like. We don't want to do another coat just because we don't want it any darker. So next step is going to be doing an oil-based polyurethane from the same company. We're going to do a mixture of wiping it with a rag and then rolling the large spaces. We have to wait 24 hours. Here's the poly floor finish from Varathane, the same company as the stain. Make sure to stir it really good and make sure you have proper ventilation, as the smell of this stuff is super strong. We lightly sanded the stain, which was recommended by Varathane, before applying the poly to get good adherence. As stated earlier, we rolled the poly on with a fine knit roller to speed up the process and used a rag in the smaller spaces for a more accurate application. Funny enough, it was actually tricky following the poly line as it's clear, so you have to keep hunting for the glossy bits in the sun to pick up where you left off. The satin poly we chose really made the floor pop, but not too much that it'll reflect harsh light. So while the floor is drying, which it looks freaking amazing, we are going to get working on our bed platform. So we're going to be doing some hole saws. This is for ventilation, of course, so our mattress doesn't get moldy. This is exactly how we did it in the van. I know I say that a lot, but we've never had any mold in our mattress in 3 years, so we're going to do it the same way. And also, we'll lose some weight by doing it this way. There really isn't one perfect way of doing this. I just staggered these holes based on the size of my plywood sheet and the diameter of the hole saw. Hold on tight to your drill when you're cutting in these holes. The hole saw has so much torque when it digs into the wood that the drill will absolutely rip out of your hand if you're not prepared. This does take quite a long time to do, but it's absolutely necessary so that you don't get mold or mildew under your mattress. Alright, so we just finished off one side of the bed platform, and now we're doing the other side. Once this one is done, gotta sand it up because it's pretty rough, and then seal it up with some Osmo oil and bring it back inside. Alright, so now that we have the platform all hole sawed out, we're gonna get to work sanding on it. I'm going to use 220 grit on the palm sander, do both surfaces, and then I'm also going to go inside of the holes and sand those out as well. As you can see, it's daylight out. We lost light last night, and that's fine because we're back out here and ready to stain/seal our plywood sheets for the bed platform. We're using Osmo oil. One of the van builders that we love and trust recommended this stuff, so this is what we're using. Wiping it out with the cloth because we could just control how much and where it's going. I feel like when you use the brush, it doesn't blend as well as doing this. You can see the Osmo oil slowly soaking into the plywood as I go. It was a very simple product to wipe on, and we are very happy with the results. It was a bit on the pricier side, but you get what you pay for. Future Cody here. You may be used to our white box truck by this point, but I'll let you in on a little secret. During the installation of our bed, we may have had the truck painted tan, our dream color. That process will be shown later in the build series, but at least you know for now. See you next week.